Welcome to Kidmissing TV. I am your host, Angelina Wilson. This is the last case of June, which should have gone up yesterday. But unfortunately, for some reason, I inadvertently edited the preview twice. So, we have to go back and do John Doe number 24 yet again. But that's okay. Early on the morning of October 11, 1945, police found an African-American teenager wandering the streets in an alley of Jacksonville, Illinois, which is in Morgan County. He was unable to communicate. He was a deaf mute. He could only write Lewis, which is believed to be his first name, Lewis. I would say it probably is. He had no ID. They couldn't find his relatives. They put him in the Lincoln State School and Colony, which is located in Lincoln, Illinois. Judge having decided that he was feeble-minded. Now, when I did this the first time, I mentioned that is it possible he went deaf in childhood? If he did, it would have been young childhood because he couldn't speak. And it is possible there are childhood illnesses that cause deafness, especially back then when there weren't really any vaccines for anything. It would be interesting to know if he had a smallpox vaccine scar. They figure he was, based on the age they figure he was when he died, they figure he was about 14 or 15 when they found him. So, if you look at the picture of him, though, I think he looks older than that. But it's hard to tell. He was called John Doe number 24, and because he was the 24th unidentified man to enter the state's mental health system. He ended up in that system for over 30 years, where he was beaten, dehumanized, probably experienced racism, starved. The conditions that the mentally ill and the handicapped were subjected to were beyond inhuman. In 1978, his name was legally changed to John Doe Boyd. He needed an official surname in order for them to sign him up for Social Security. In 1987, he was transferred. By 1987, he had been transferred to numerous facilities. He was sent to live at the Smiley Living Center in Peoria, Illinois. By this time, he was beginning to lose his sight, they think from diabetes. He danced at Christmas parties to the vibration of the music. He had regaled them with pantomimes of like jumping jazz spots and stuff like that, and foot stomping music and it's like, okay, so was he from New Orleans? I mean, that's been posited. I'm not the only one that's thought that. But how in the world would he have gotten to Illinois? In August of 1993, which is shortly before he died, he underwent surgery for colon cancer, after which he had trouble eating and became depressed. He was then put in the Sharon Oaks nursing home. Just 2 months later, on November 28, 1993, he passed away from a stroke. They believed he was about 64 years old. He was buried at the Parkview Cemetery, Peoria, Illinois. Country singer, acclaimed singer-songwriter, award-winning singer-songwriter, Mary Chapin Carpenter read about this unfortunate soul in the New York Times. She wrote a song called John Doe Number 24 and paid for a headstone for him. And his gravestone reads, John Doe, in quotes, Boyd, unknown to 11/28/93. Life's a mystery, but so too is the human heart. Now, there was a book titled God Knows His Name, The True Story of John Doe Number 24, written by journalist David Bake or Bakey, Bakke. Now, if he was in his teens when they found him in late 1945, and he died in 1993, 65, 75, 85, 95, he would have been 50 years, so it was 48 years later. So 14 plus 48 is 64, right? No, that'd be 62. 16. Oh. Oh, wait, yeah, 6 and 4, 0. No, that doesn't work either. Anyway, is it 15? He was, okay, it was 48 years earlier, and they felt he was 64. So 64 minus 48. Okay. So let's go here. I need to turn my volume off. Where is it? Ew. Okay. So, he was found in 1945. He died 48 years later. So, and I think he was 64. So 64 minus 48 equals. So they think he was about 16. When they found him. You have to remember, in those days, if your child was born with a disability, you were highly encouraged, almost forced, to put your child in an institution. That was true right up through the 1970s when I was born, because they told my parents to institutionalize me, because they didn't know how bad the brain damage was after I stopped breathing. And they told them, she's not going to walk, she's not going to talk. Oops. So, I would have been put away for my blindness alone back then. I mean, I'm not completely blind, not even close. But when I was a kid, I had patch therapy because I am legally blind in my right eye. I do not have enough sight to drive because I don't have peripheral vision or depth perception. That alone would have gotten me institutionalized in the 40s. The fact that I ran into everything because I couldn't see. So, and I did. I literally ran into walls. My mother said I had a perma bruise right there. Shit, you had a permanent bruise right in the middle of your forehead because you ran into those door casings every shot. So, and it's true. I still run into door casings, usually with my arms. So I try to leave the door wide open if I'm walking through it. Oh, excuse me. So, that alone would have gotten me institutionalized in the 40s. And they certainly wouldn't have treated it, you know, the way that they did in the 70s. So, and early 80s. And like I said, they told my parents when I was a baby, before they even knew I couldn't see anything, to, believe me, when I was a baby, couldn't see anything. to institutionalize me because I wasn't going to learn to walk or talk or anything. And my parents were like hell, you know? But they had that choice because they weren't going to be. See, back in this young man's day, his parents would have been treated like there was something wrong with them if people knew that they had a child with any kind of disability. And that was true back then. Parents feared being looked down upon because they had a child with a disability. And so, yeah, that's why he would have been institutionalized. But if he became deaf through an illness in toddlerhood or whatever, he might not have been. And he might have wandered away from home and they didn't know what the heck to do. Although I personally think, and they didn't think this way in 1945, but especially if your teenager has a disability, which clearly he did not have an intellectual disability. He simply was deaf and mute and hadn't learned American Sign Language, ASL, which probably wasn't as common back then. You know, he could pantomime, he could, real basic. And there wouldn't have been compassion for him from the police like there would be today. If the police found a deaf mute, it would be all over the news saying, please, somebody come forward for this deaf mute teenager that we found wandering around in the middle of the night. And they would put him in a foster home until they could find parents. They would take his blood and do DNA, all that stuff. They should exhume him and do DNA, by the way. Today. So it's so much different than it was 81 years ago. I'm sorry, 79 years ago. Next year will mark 80 years since he was found wandering on the street. He died in 1993, which last year was 30 years ago. So if you take 45, which is the year he was found, and you subtract 16, that will give us an approximate year of birth, okay? There we go, not now. 45 minus 16 equals approximately 1929 is his year of birth. So, that helps. He was born during the Great Depression, and he was black, which makes it worse. I'm not laughing because he was black. That was a chuckle of, could the cards be more stacked against him? At the ridiculousness of the bad luck. You're born black in the 40s. Well, you're a black teenager in the 40s. You're born black in 1929. You grow up in the Great Depression as an African-American person, which means you probably already were poor to begin with at that time period. All the racism, all the way people treated the disabled, all of it. All at once on him. And, being a minority besides. It's like, And that book I highly recommend. I actually did read it. I will put a link to it. I will put a link to my Facebook group for him. He frequently wore a straw hat. He carried with him a backpack, which had a collection of glasses, rings, and silverware. Wild accounts of foot stomping and circus parades. Foot stomping, music, and circus parades. Nobody knows whether his DNA, fingerprints, or dentals. I would have thought they would have fingerprinted him way back then, when they found him. Oh boy. What was that? No, you need the... Oh my goodness. You need the app. You need the app. That's how you get paid. Period. I will call them Monday. Anyway. So. Okay, records indicate he was severely retarded. Well, they may have assumed that, but it doesn't seem to me like he was. I get that. I will call on Monday and try to figure it all out. They said if I had any problem, they would have someone help me. Okay. Now, when it says rings, glasses, and silverware, do they mean glasses as in cups or glasses as in eyeglasses? Because he had a habit of just picking stuff up and putting it in his backpack. And no one spoke at his funeral. It was asked if anyone had any words to say, and no one did. Really? His caregivers couldn't talk about the person that he was? That's so wrong. Wrongity, wrong. Yes, I said wrongity, and I know it's not a word, but... Ew. Anyway, that is more than a little bit irritating to me. I don't have a phone number, unfortunately, in this case. But he was behind the 8 ball from day one. And if he truly was mentally retarded, then he was already institutionalized and wouldn't have seen these jazz bands and circus parades and all that stuff. So that doesn't make sense. He wasn't always, and that tells you right there he wasn't always institutionalized. Which means he lived with his family. Why didn't they come forward? Did they not see the reports? We need DNA in this case. It's the only way we're going to get his name. So, let's pray the DNA Doe Project or from the one that CeCe Moore works for, one of those pick up this case. Because I think they can identify him. He is identifiable. So, you'll notice the pictures in the poster. One is a newer picture of him sitting there. Someone cleaned it up a little bit, but one is a newer picture that's been released over the last year or so. So, please check out the Facebook group, John Doe number 24, or John Doe 24. I will put it, like I said, in the links. I will put Mary Chapin Carpenter's song in the end cards. Thank you so much. I will also link the book. Thank you so much for joining me. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And I'll see you next time, when we begin the month of July. Actually, I have an extras video before that, but we will begin the month of July on Monday. Bye, guys.